Thanks for joining us. I'm Kyle Clark.
And I'm Kim Christensen. A bill that would require police officers to get a warrant to search driver tracking databases is moving ahead in the state legislature.
It's advancing despite strong opposition from law enforcement around the state. 9 News reporter Spencer Seuscher has the details from the Capitol.
Police departments and district attorneys from around the area sure did their best to try to kill the surveillance bill on Monday, but it's advancing with some amendments too.
It would be akin to if tomorrow everyone in this room was no longer able to have their cell phone in their pocket.
It would take you an awfully long time to find a Colorado law enforcement agency in favor of Senate Bill 70, a bill that would require them to get a warrant to search a license plate tracking database, like Flock.
It's created a convenience.
Take Republican El Paso and Teller County District Attorney Michael Allen's word for it. He's speaking on behalf of all 23 of Colorado's DAs, Republican and Democrat.
The effect of this bill would allow criminals to take advantage of modern technology to plan, perpetrate, and hide criminal activity while requiring law enforcement to work in the Stone Age, essentially.
3.3 million years ago, cars, let alone AI-enhanced license plate readers, were not a thing. But concerns about mass surveillance and how private companies are sharing data location in 2026, that's real.
Immigrant communities have seen those tools used beyond their original purpose. That history matters. When guardrails are weak, trust erodes.
If we have to write a probable cause warrant to access this data, it's going to be very hindering to many investigations where we don't already have probable cause.
That point from the Jeff Coast sheriff, not having enough and relying on a Flock-type system to create probable cause, is actually why some like this bill.
Thank you.
Like Christiana Elser, whose story went viral after police in Columbine Valley used Flock data to build their case, wrongly accusing her of stealing packages.
He told me you can't get a breath of fresh air in or out of town without us knowing. He also told me that he's tracked me over the last month 20 times going in and out of that town. He had a summons already prepared for theft before he even spoke to me. I was faced with the dystopian task of proving my innocence against the apparent evidence from the system.
The bill is advancing out of committee, passing on a 5-2 vote. It'll see some changes, like allowing police departments to hold data for up to 30 days, an increase from its original version.
There is clearly a huge mass of the public who do not think that you should have this data.
Spencer Seuscher, 9 News.
As President Trump targets Colorado over the use of mail-in voting that Trump falsely claims is rigged, state legislators are considering changing the law to get ballots out sooner. And a county clerk says the state is working on a contingency plan to preserve mail-in voting if Trump forces the Postal Service to stop delivering ballots. Mail ballots are sent 3 weeks before an election in Colorado. State legislators are considering extending that to 4 weeks over concerns the Trump administration could slow down the Postal Service.
Is that the wrong attention to be giving Colorado when President Trump has clearly been targeting and punishing states like Colorado over this issue?
I don't think that there is anything that we could do or say that would change President Trump's mind about targeting Colorado.
Last week at a rally in Georgia, the president said he only supports mail ballots for the military, people who are ill, disabled, or people on vacation.
If you don't like tomorrow's forecast, you won't have to go far to experience something else. It will be warm and sunny in Denver. In the foothills, you can capture the wind experience. And then in the mountains, you can get the wind and the snow. So
those small dogs would have been toast, Kathy.
They would have been. Kathy, it's your choice.
I prefer the snow and no wind.
Yeah.
Reasonable. Right?
Yeah, but you can't get that way tomorrow.
We just can't get what we want ever down here, not with this current weather pattern. We have a summer-like weather pattern for Denver for tomorrow with record highs in the 70s possible. While in the mountains, it's a return to winter with an approaching storm from the northwest. It's already spreading the high and mid-level clouds across the Front Range. Temperatures have come down out of the upper 60s into the upper 40s and low 50s, so pretty mild for this time of night. I've been watching the wind closely because the winds will be increasing tomorrow as that front comes in. Fire weather warnings out for Denver, Greeley, Fort Collins, Boulder, and the I-25 corridor, Pueblo down to Trinidad. Gusts to 50 and humidity values about 18%. Those of you west of I-25 could see worse wind, gusts to 75 and 80. So garbage day, plan ahead, and objects on the patio, just kind of batten down the hatches there. We have a dry night in Denver, a dry day tomorrow. Foothill snow will be developing throughout the afternoon, and blowing snow may create some winter driving on I-70 late in the day. Temperatures in the 40s, so pretty mild overnight time period. Coming up, more on how much snow we're expecting in the mountains. We've got fire weather concerns in Denver yet again. And how long will the wind last in the foothills? I'll have that forecast just ahead.
President Trump will deliver the annual State of the Union address tomorrow night. Lawmakers will gather in the House chamber to hear him lay out his agenda for the year ahead and tout his accomplishments. The president is already warning it's going to be a long one. It's worth noting the last time he addressed a joint session of Congress in March of 2025, he talked for more than an hour and 40 minutes. You can watch that speech right here on 9 News. Tom Lamas of the ABC and the NBC News team will have special coverage starting at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Boulder's years-long effort to hold oil companies liable for damage linked to climate change is headed to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Today, the conservative majority court agreed to take up an appeal by Suncor and ExxonMobil. 9 News reporter Rachel Krause explains how those companies are trying to get the lawsuit tossed.
After years of back and forth between Boulder and oil and gas companies, the nation's highest court now says it will hear the case. Suncor Energy and ExxonMobil are trying to block lawsuits that would hold the industry liable for billions in damage from climate change.
Well, it's going to be interesting. There's a few legal issues, and why this is so interesting is because the case has not actually went to trial.
9 News legal analyst Whitney Traylor says SCOTUS will consider if it's too early for the case to be reviewed since it hasn't gone to trial. And they'll consider if fossil fuel companies are liable for the impacts of climate change and can be taken to court.
What Boulder and San Miguel counties have done is they sued saying these are violations of state laws. And what these companies are going to say is, hey, this is a federal issue. It should be in federal court.
But getting the case ready for the high court won't be simple.
A lawyer who argues before the U.S. Supreme Court has to know basically everything about the case and everything about the court's decisions.
9 News legal analyst Scott Robinson argued a case in front of the Supreme Court in the 80s and won. Robinson says preparing a case for the Supreme Court is painstaking and intense.
What is really important is to anticipate all questions the justices might ask, no matter how difficult, and then know in advance what you're going to say in reply. It's an extraordinarily exciting opportunity for a lawyer, and it can also be extraordinarily humiliating for someone who doesn't do the work beforehand.
It'll be months before the justices hear those arguments. Traylor says what they decide could impact how and if companies are held liable for climate change moving forward.
The wheels of justice turn, but they turn slowly.
The case will likely have implications for other lawsuits. Arguments in front of the Supreme Court are expected in the fall. Rachel Krause, 9 News.
State regulators are calling for a $1.5 million penalty for a well blowout in northern Colorado that forced about a dozen families out of their homes. The uncontrolled release near Gailton, northeast of Greeley, happened April of last year. Chevron says a contractor working for Noble Energy tried to install equipment. The equipment fell on that contractor and broke the person's leg. The well then started to spew oil, gas, and water into the air. It took days for it to be plugged. Cleanup is not expected to be complete until spring of 2023. State regulators will discuss that proposed $1.5 million penalty at a hearing next month. The city of Denver could temporarily halt the construction of new data centers while discussing how to better regulate them. Mayor's office says city council will consider an ordinance that would pause building for at least several months while they discuss energy and water consumption. The company CoreSite is currently building a data center in the El Rio-Swancia neighborhood in North Denver. Activists have been pushing them to disclose water and power use and to commit to limiting carbon emissions. The mayor's office says existing data centers and projects currently permitted or under construction would not be impacted by the moratorium, but they would be expected to follow any new guidelines. The proposed ordinance has not yet been filed, and there's no timeline for when council will vote on it.
The now former park ranger who claimed he was attacked at Staunton State Park but really stabbed himself will avoid jail time. Back in August, Callum Heskett reported that someone stabbed him. That set off a big search for a non-existent suspect. Today, Heskett pleaded guilty to attempting to influence a public servant and false reporting of an emergency. He was sentenced to 3 years probation in order to pay more than $16,000 in restitution. If he violates the terms of that deal, he'll face between 2 to 6 years in prison. Attorneys for a man who's spent 12 years in prison for a murder he says he didn't commit hope to convince a judge he was a victim of outrageous government misconduct. They want records from CBI to make that case. Michael Clark was convicted in the 1994 shooting death of Marty Grissom. That conviction was based in part on DNA analysis and testimony by Missy Woods, who is now accused of falsifying results and other anomalies during her decades-long career at CBI. Clark's conviction was vacated and he was freed last April. Prosecutors plan to take him to trial again. At a hearing today, his defense team asked for access to files in other cases where Woods did testing on DNA. The judge sided with the defense today, but she also gave the CBI 2 weeks to ask her to reconsider that decision.
Denver is working on a plan to notify GPS mapping technologies when it changes streets. Turns out the city didn't even try to tell Google Maps and similar companies when it changed busy one-way streets into two-way, and some chaos followed. Last week, the city converted 13th and 14th between Quebec and Yosemite from one-way to two-way. While the city says they worked to get the message out, we saw a bunch of drivers that were confused going the wrong way into headlong traffic. And the city did not notify Apple Maps or Google Maps. After we asked questions, they said that they would work to create a formal process to notify those apps when streets are changed in the future. When voters passed the Vibrant Denver bond last year, they approved money for a safety study on 13th and 14th between Quebec and Colorado. That's a much longer stretch of street. The city says any further discussions about changing other parts of those roads to two-way traffic would include more public outreach.
CDOT is working to crack down on speeding in northern Colorado. Drivers clocked going over the speed limit in the work zone on I-25 between Meade and Berthoud will get warnings starting Sunday. CDOT says the cameras were installed last month where construction crews are putting up express lanes in both directions of the interstate. The agency doesn't expect to start issuing fines until April 2nd. Those fines will cost $75 each. This will be the second corridor in CDOT's speed enforcement program. The first launched last summer. That was on Highway 119 between Boulder and Longmont. The state says speeding violations have dropped by more than 80% there.